and welcome to African News Review. And I'm your host, Adesoji Iginla, and with me, as usual, is a couple of comrades who've decided to put themselves through the rigmarole of explaining to us how it is that our condition is the way it is. And we'll go into, so again, welcome. And with me, as usual, is an author, uh, Your Self Love Revolution, co-host of Women and Resistance, Aya Fubara Eneli Esquire. Welcome, sister.
Thank you.
And yeah, the our world-renowned comrade, the voice of reason, I still will say, from Black Star News, and the author of Manufacturing Hate. And I see on social media that he's gotten his manuscript back and he's decided to, hack it to pieces with his pen.
The copyright. I always have the manuscripts. The copyright.
Oh yeah, the copyright. Sorry, he's got the copyright back, and so we should get a new iteration of Manufacturing Hate, and is none other than Milton Allimadi. Welcome, comrade.
Welcome.
Asante. Thank you.
Yes, today is not going to be articles. We're going to be looking at the lives and times of a great African like some others, but he's special for what he brought to the fore. And I'm speaking of none other than the good Captain Thomas Sankara. For those who don't know, Thomas Sankara was the former head of state of former Upper Volta, which he then renamed Burkina Faso. He was born on December 22nd, 1949 in Yako, French Upper Volta at the time, but now Burkina Faso. He was a military officer that was clearly influenced by the realities of his people around him and his training. But we should go more into that as we speak. And so we're going to be pulling quotes from a couple of speeches he delivered during his short reign as heads of state, and you would see how poignant they are. But before we go into that, can we just say again, because it's a news review program, first things first, sister, what's the preeminent news article where you are?
Well, first, let me say that today marks the anniversary of when the Liberian Constitution was ratified, I guess. So yesterday was their Independence Day. July 26th and July 27th is the day that the Constitution took effect. So I suppose I would just say congratulations. I won't say Happy Independence Day because Liberia is not independent. Um, but just to acknowledge that. In our neck of the woods, we continue with our struggle with our redistricting. We had an opportunity to go and give live testimony at our capital here in Texas this past Wednesday, and they restricted the hours for which they would take testimony to just 5 hours. Less than 20% of the people who signed up were actually able to say anything, and they shut it down. So, so much for democracy. But anyway, just one of the things happening, continuing, and we will see this continue through the summer, and then see how other states pick it up. Because again, Texas is always a testing ground for a lot of the racial shenanigans in this country.
Okay. Brother Milton?
I think it might be the same item I mentioned last week. The Epstein file continues to percolate, and you can tell how serious it is whenever you see Trump escalating other diversionary tactics. So now he's talking about putting Obama on trial for treason, right? Accusing him of treason. So everything, he has a list of diversions that he's going to use. And obviously you don't pull out the Obama card unless you're really panicking about something. So I think that this thing is going to get a little more serious than it is right now. Let's keep our eyes on that. I'm
brother.
happy to see from Europe that, yes, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm happy to see that France has officially recognized the state of Palestine. I hope some other European countries do so. And I hope it actually makes a difference on the ground, because if you recognize a state and the state asks you for a particular type of help, I don't see why you should not follow through on that.
Mm.
So those to me are the two theories, interesting items of this week.
Okay.
I was just going to add with the Epstein files, he's taking it. The Obama card wasn't enough. He now wants to investigate Kamala, Beyonce, and Oprah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is serious stuff. This is serious stuff. You know, cards that he was supposed to dole out slowly is now throwing everything out.
Oh yeah. And by the
I
way,
just hope, I hope he doesn't launch war on some other country, because that's a strategy that the Democrats have used in the past. So
yeah, to
I hope that
distract.
doesn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, he's currently in Scotland, and the locals have given him the very British welcome. Let's just put it that way. So if you go online, you would see our very British way of welcoming tyrants. Yes. Coming back to today, we're looking at the lives, the speeches of Thomas Sankara. Well, Thomas Sankara, for those who are not aware, he was the head of state of a country previously known as Upper Volta, that is now Burkina Faso, and he governed between August 4, 1983, up to October 15, 1987. Technically 4 years. But that 4 years was replete with, poignant times that he made certain pronouncements that, if we look back in time and even up to contemporary times, they're still very relevant. And so we're going to look at some of them through the theme of his speeches. So for the first one, this speech was delivered on the International Women's Day, March 8, 1987, titled "The Revolution Cannot Triumph Without the Emancipation of Women." So I'm going to pull a quote or two from this speech, and I'll get my esteemed panel to give us their take on what it means then and also now. He begins it. It says, "It's not every occurrence for a man to speak to many women at once. Nor does it happen every day that a man suggests to many women new battles to be joined. A man experiences the first bashfulness the moment he becomes conscious he is looking at a woman. So, sisters, you will understand that despite the joy and the pleasures it gives me to be speaking to you, I still remain a man who sees in every one of you a mother, a sister, or a wife." And then he says this: "The revolution's promises are already a reality for men, but for women, they're still merely a rumor. And yet, the authenticity and the future of our revolution depends on women. These are vital and essential questions because nothing whole, nothing definite or lasting can be accomplished in our country as long as a crucial part of ourselves is kept in this condition of subjugation, a condition imposed over the course of centuries by various systems of exploitation." Who wants to have a stab at it first? Sister?
Um,
Please.
let me start off by saying that our dear ancestor died at age 39, and it's important, at least for me, to recognize the values and his focus even at that age, but also to take a moment to just grieve over what he could have evolved into. Now, hopefully not like Manuel, was it Noriega who initially,
Noriega.
no, not a, was it Noriega or Ortega
Noriega.
in
Panama.
no, the one in Nicaragua. It was
Uh,
Ortega,
Ortega, yeah.
Okay.
who initially started off great and then has become an authoritarian. But for me, whenever I talk about any of these men, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, that are frozen in time, it's it's just startling to me to recognize that at this age, I am older than they were when they did all that they did, and subsequently were killed, assassinated, murdered, whatever terminology you want to use. Having said that, his speech given in 1987 is still so relevant today, maybe even more so, because the situation for women in Africa, and he also talks about women universally, women across the world, has not gotten that much better. Um, he goes into the history, the genesis of where this oppression, subjugation came from, and why it continues to abound. And he talks quite stridently about the role women must play in taking back their power. I wish that more of our men and women would not just recognize that we don't win if we don't win together, period, that we do need each other. I also wish that there were some, as I read through the speech again, there were some contradictions, because as much as he is fighting to position women, there were also
Right.
some of these lingering um
That will seep out.
ideas about what womanhood is. And so at one point where he was talking about the woman who is educated and is also economically independent, then there was particular advice given to her that perhaps is not given to men, about how she must then bring herself down to an extent, and serve in a certain way so as not to, I guess, incur the ire of men. And
Mm,
so this continues to be a very important issue for us to look at
Right.
as communities, and to figure out, even on an individual basis, how are men and women interacting in the Black community, in the African diaspora, in the on the African continent, and how do we bridge these gaps so that we really can win? Because we will not win if we are not in one accord.
mm. But amazing.
Yes. Well, that's true. The sister said, I think because of the way men are socialized, it's impossible to have an understanding that it's completely 100%. I think, of course, compared to all the other African heads of states, presidents, he would be like 100% compared to them. But the sister obviously pointed out some contradictions, which are lingering, simply because so you're surprised at the way he's actually very sophisticated in his appreciation and understanding, just given the way men are socialized, particularly we know how we are reared in African countries, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So for him to have a dialectical breakdown of the history of how, particularly under capital, and in our case, I think what translates much more than capital better for Africa is under colonialism, really. Um, so both the men and women are subjugated to exploitation of their labor. Then the women have the added burden of then also being under the thumb of the men, right? So it's a double exploitation for the sense of the women. So, and in terms of what you read, I like the way he started off. And, that's a little bit of a contradiction too, even though it reads very well. And most of what he says is really like almost like a tribute and celebration of women. But then there are parts, for example, it's good that you see them as wives, as sisters, as mothers. But then that's also the contradiction that you're trying to overcome, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They should not be seen that way. Although in his case, we understand what he was saying. I think he was also trying to put them at ease. Um, so that's how I interpreted that as well. But there's some contradictions that come out. They're not major contradictions, because the substance of what he's saying is actually very revolutionary if adopted. Because he's saying, particularly in Burkina Faso, 52% of the population. So how can you say for men, the revolution of reality, because they executed the overthrow of the government.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who formed the initial members of the government. They're the ones setting the policies. Where are the women? And he acknowledged that. He said, August the 4th, 1983 was a great day, except the women are missing. And he's acknowledging that, willing to admit that. So I saw that as very positive as well. And then, of course, what he said was borne out by what he actually did in practice. So I think he set a great example for other African leaders. And the sister said, we're still a long way. How many women have we had leading African countries, really?
Yeah, 5%.
So the agency of women historically has really been missing for a substantial part of our existence, and that's a problem.
Okay, so in contemporary times now, looking across the world, obviously, let's not box in cells into Africa. As a leader speaking to women across the world, say, for instance, in the United States, in light of the many, many, many laws that have been passed that specifically just targeted women, would you say that has not, what's the word, largely falling on deaf ears? I mean, it has, but is there any hope in how women can, regain the front foot?
Well, so like he was addressing, and I know there's some women who will disagree with me. He was talking about equality, not even gaining a front foot. I think what I see with male female relationships is the same thing I see with quote unquote white black relationships, even amongst so-called allies.
Okay.
Is that, yeah, we want you guys not to be enslaved and not to be struggling. However, still know your place. Like, you don't get to be quote unquote above us or equal to us. And certainly here in the United States, we can't even get our Congress to agree on equal pay for women. That's not even something that in 2025 this United States government has been able to put in place. Of course, we've repeatedly rejected women as president in the United States of America. And so we have a long way to go. As an attorney looking at domestic violence cases, and yes, women can also be the oppressors, if you will, but more times than not, they are the victims. And so it's still a very, very thorny issue. And what makes it so much more complicated is that it's not just men subjugating women. It's also women having bought into the propaganda and having been socialized in the same way, who will sometimes be the ones who are the gatekeepers or the ones pulling women down or castigating them if they're not in their place. And so, just to reference another podcast that you're a part of, Women and Resistance, we have seen, as we've covered the women on that podcast, over and over again, that these women are resistant on multiple fronts.
Yeah.
Yes, outwardly in terms of what social structure is doing, but within their own homes, within their own intimate relationships, more times than not, they have also had to physically sometimes even resist that oppression within their own homes.
Brother Milton?
All right. So I think also in this country, the European American women, they need to deal with a major contradiction that they have, which is this really inexplicable and senseless fear of the concept of, quote unquote, the Negro is coming, because I mean, no, think about it. You are willing to vote a guy who killed Roe v. Wade with his appointments on the Supreme Court. You are willing to vote for a guy who said you have a right to grab women by the private parts once you're a celebrity. To me, that's a very serious issue. You need to explore what is making you do those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And I think a good part of it is the fear of the Black man. And it completely makes no sense. What is the person with no power at all going to be doing to you? So it's like the very wealthy oligarch are able to use the race card very effectively to continue allowing the women to continue, European American women to continue submitting to subjugation. And if any are listening, I recommend they listen to Race and Class in Guyanese Politics, where Rodney explains how pitting Afro-Guyanese against Indian Guyanese, they're calling each other, Washi and Swami and all that nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the 1% European planter class is counting the money on the bank. In this country, the same way. It is primarily the European American man that is in control of pretty much all the assets and resources. And he's devised schemes to keep, working people fighting amongst themselves, to keep the European American women in fear of the Negroes coming. It's completely senseless. So I think while they may agree with everything that Sankara might have said or written, they still need to do some deep soul searching. They need, how a long time ago Farrakhan called that the Million Man March. They need to have a million European American women march, and go through those issues. No, really, they do. They do. Otherwise, they're going to be undermining consistently their potential to really gain some power in this country,
Brother Milton, if I could add to that, this whole notion of feminism as well is that my sisters, my African sisters, my non-white sisters, we need to be very careful about how we embrace that language of feminism and how that shows up in our interactions within our own community. Because the issue white women should have with their men is a little different from the issue that we should have with our men, in my opinion. Now, yes, it's still patriarchy and so on and so forth, but there are different power dynamics going on here. And so, as a woman, my goal is to live peaceably and equally with my man. It is for us to collectively harness all our gifts and work to one common good. I'm not fighting against my man. And sometimes white feminism, that's their struggle. I'm going to fight imperialism. I'm going to fight their notion of white supremacy because there's nothing supreme about them or they wouldn't be so afraid of us. But I don't want to bring that mentality home and see my husband or see my son or see another male as someone that I'm supposed to be opposing in the way that white women a lot of times couch their fight when they do fight.
I agree with that too, because the history and the experiences have not been the same, certainly not. So I agree with that.
Okay. Yes. So for the next speech, we come to the United States, specifically Harlem, New York. And this speech was actually brought by his first engagement with imperialism. Brother Milton, you want to speak to why he went to Harlem to address the African population, the Pan-African population, rather. Could you just give us an insight into why that is?
Right. Okay. So before he came, I think that's the year he also, that's the year after he had come into power, a year later.
Yeah, it was the
year. So, and supposedly, he had been invited to the White House too. But in order for him to accept the invitation, he also had to allow the U.S. Embassy in Burkina Faso to get a copy of his speech in advance, the speech that he was going to make at the United Nations. And he refused. He said, no, we can't do that. So supposedly the invitation to the White House was withdrawn, which of course everything happens for good reason. That then gave him the opportunity. And he still might have gone to Harlem anyway, because the person that whose organization arranged that, Elombe Brand, you know, was the December 12th movement. I'm sorry, the Patrice Lumumba coalition.
Coalition, yeah.
Uh, right. Uh, he's always been able to get many Pan-African leaders to go to Harlem. So I think he might have ended up doing both anyway. He would still have gone to Harlem. So he went to Harlem. And what impressed me the most was that he was not even making any fiery speech or anything when he went to Harlem, to that school setting. He appreciated the culture. In fact, I think he spent much of his comments talking about the dance, the artistic display.
Yeah.
He said he felt like it was in Africa. He said they're going to have a major artistic dance display in Burkina Faso, and he invited them.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, even if you only send one representative. And he also said, of course, the famous film festival, the annual film festival in Burkina Faso, he spoke about that. He invited them to that as well. So he shows how he knows the importance of culture in revolutions as well.
Yeah.
And that, of course, he emphasized that we should not be afraid to be Africans. Don't be ashamed of being Africans. He knows a lot of us, we wait to see what the European says. Is the European going to endorse that? We almost wait for permission or approval. He said, no.
Yeah.
He said, for example, now we are training together with Ghana. We have joint exercises of our armed forces. Unlike all the other countries, they have exercises with European armed forces, you know. So I like the fact that he was talking as if he was just amongst friends, not very materialist interpretation of history. Well, I think the best thing to say about him is that he knows his settings.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he knows the language for
Read the room.
each group that he's addressing. So
Yeah.
that's what I took most from that
Read the
visit
room.
to Harlem.
Okay. So that said, I'll just read a quote, and I think you've actually stolen my thunder there. So this speech was titled "Our White House is in Black Harlem" at a rally in Harlem, October 3rd, 1984. And he says, there are many of us who believe Harlem will give African soul its true dimension. There are many of us Africans, very many in fact, who have come to understand that our existence must be devoted to the struggle to rehabilitate the name of the African. We must wage the fight to free ourselves from domination by other men and from oppression. And he ends it with what you just alluded to. Do you know why we organized the bold union maneuvers with Ghana? It is to show imperialism that we are capable, or what we are capable of in Africa. Many other countries prefer to organize their military maneuvers jointly with foreign powers. When we hold our next maneuvers, there should be fighters from Harlem who come to participate with us. And he ends. So I think what he's actually alluding to there was this used to happen. You remember when Algiers used to be known as Black Algiers, where the Black Panthers went to Algeria to learn how to organize, to fight, to do military. So it was hacking back to those days. Now, based on what is going on in contemporary Pan-African spaces and online and what have you, how important is it to underscore the point he's making here that there needs to be a joint offense with regards to imperialism?
Okay, so let me try and respond to that in hopefully terms that all of us can immediately grasp.
Mm.
I grow chicken. Can you imagine if my chicken, concerned about their security, decided to call a meeting with the foxes that are in my area and with the snakes that are in my area, and to
Yep,
figure out how they can have joint training on how to secure the
yep.
chicken coop? Yeah,
No, absolutely.
yeah.
No, really.
Yeah,
That's what they've been doing for 60 years.
Absurd.
They've been doing that for 60 years in Africa.
It is absolute. And
Well
then the chicken says, what weapons do you think we should use? Okay, let's secure the border. You secure this side and I'll secure that. And now when we chicken will sit in the coop. I mean, it's patently ridiculous. Like it's beyond common sense.
They say what happened to 5 chicken? We seem to be fewer numbers today.
And then they say,
what happened last night?
Let's call some more of the fox so that they can help us because we've lost 5 chicken, so they can prevent any further loss. And by the way, we're gonna pay you to come and help us. Here are our eggs. We know you Snake King to steal the eggs in the first place. We're gonna willingly give it to you in exchange for your protection. You see how stupid that sounds? So it is unfortunate again that a speech that was made, 30 some years ago?
84.
Is still so relevant today. And here's the other piece that really struck me as I was rereading this. I knew Alombe Brath. He didn't know me. I met him a number of times and, spoke with him and saw how he moved and how passionate he was about us as Africans, regardless of what your name is or where the boat dropped you off. The question I have for us is, today, how many African leaders come into this country, United States, and go to Harlem? Today, do we still have a Black Harlem with all the gentrification that has happened? Today, do we still have Pan-African leaders here who will openly and willingly embrace such a figure as Thomas Sankara? Particularly after the White House has said, nah, you can't come anymore. Would we have the guts to lay out a welcoming carpet for him? And that is as problematic as what is happening on the continent, is that rather than moving forward in unity, we seem to have taken some very significant steps backwards, both in terms of what African leaders are doing, or so-called leaders, and in what Africans in the diaspora, and specifically here in the United States, are doing, and how much ground we have lost here as well.
No, that is a sad question, and you're absolutely right. I mean, in addition to the Patrice Lumumba Coalition, Alombe Brath, there's December 12th movement also in Harlem. And of course, they belong to that generation that grew up in the 60s. And not only did they learn about African decolonization, they witnessed it. They saw it with their eyes. They participated by visiting at that critical moment in history. Malcolm, Ahmed Touré, aka Stokely Carmichael, and of course, Alombe Brath. So they went there, they experienced, and they interacted. And they saw the benefits in the connection, connecting the diaspora with the continent. And we need to find the next generation to continue making that connection, you see? And that is a challenge. I think, obviously, we're having these types of conversations as well. So we want people to know that we're having this type of conversation, that we want to connect with like-minded Africans in diaspora who want to continue that process. That, one of the main reasons I'm completely convinced, whether they let, first of all, think about it this way. Why would if Malcolm's only threat was domestically, between Malcolm and the nation after he had left the nation already. If that was the only threat, why would he be eliminated? Or why would the police allow him to be eliminated? When having him alive and continuing division between his group and the nation would be much more beneficial. So you want him to live and continue, dividing their forces, right? He became dangerous when he started making the connection with the African continent. And I think for the system to allow him to be eliminated, whether he was eliminated, the gunman, looked like him, came from his former organization. That's the small part of the thing. I think the bigger picture was to see that he was eliminated. It was so important what he was doing on the continent that every country he visited, the ambassador there would meet with the people that he had spoken to undermine what Malcolm had told them. Think about that.
Yeah.
That's how an important of a national security threat he had become to this country in terms of trying to make that connection with the African continent. So we need to find people who realize the importance of that connection and what it could also positively impact things in this country for Africans in diaspora, and to connect with them and to continue that movement.
I mean,
Brother Milton,
you meant
Brother Milton, as you were talking, something that came to mind, inspired by what you just said, is how studiously these people, our oppressors, our enemies, study us and
Yes, indeed.
consistently work to undermine us. We, on the other hand, whether it's because of religion, as Sankara and some other speeches alludes to, this idea of turn the other cheek, we, on the other hand, are often caught unawares by our very open enemies. We are not tracking what they do. We're not paying attention. We're not connecting the dots. And when it hits, it's like, oh my God, where did this come from? So we're not strategizing in the way that we should. That just, when you just talked about them following Malcolm, and we know the FBI was on that entire tour with him.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
then coordinating to make sure that their ambassadors come back. They don't leave any seed to grow. They immediately come and poison to prevent our unity. We need to understand how hard these people work to keep us in the state that we are.
Yep.
It's not happenstance.
Absolutely. I was doing some research. There's a website for the archival material for the State Department, and this was Kennedy, and I forget which year it was, in the early '60s. Had gone to Berlin. What year was that when he made that famous speech? And he made a few German words, and it became like sensational headline. So Kennedy was asking his aides what was the global reaction to his speech. Saying, oh, it was, and they were giving him like this. I'm reading it now. Well received in Europe, and they quoted what a few of the European newspapers said in Britain, in Germany. It was well received in a few African countries. I think they quoted, I forget which newspaper they quoted, but then they also quoted, I think it was in the Ghana Times. They quoted Malcolm, who was critical of that speech, and said, African countries should not be deceived by Kennedy and allow colonialism to be replaced by dollarism. So they're actually soliciting and making sure that they are documenting what Malcolm had said about the speech of the US president at that time. So obviously they took him very, very seriously.
I mean, I just want to add also that you asked a question that if Malcolm was not considered dangerous to the foreign machinations of the United States, why is it that they got rid of him? We also have to understand that everybody that made a connection with the continent, they went after Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, MLK, the Black Panther Party, who were based in Algeria, the gentleman who was murdered in Guyana, Walter Rodney, Paul Robeson,
Marcus
I
Garvey,
mean, Marcus Garvey.
whoever, yes.
So you
start talking
understand
about
that
Black unity, you got to go.
exactly. So that,
Exactly. Not all who went. The
yeah,
ones who spoke about Black unity.
yeah,
There's some of the Urban League, for example, the
yeah,
leadership of the Urban League,
hmm
they went, some
on their own.
congressmen, they went. Nothing happened to them. They were not talking
hmm
African unity.
Yeah.
So they knew the ones to go after as well.
So it goes to speak to what Sankara was talking about, that, many Africans, and the moment you start tying the question of unity and solidarity, then you become a target. And so we
Yeah.
need to have a much more, fluid and strategic way of doing it. I like one of his quotes when someone asked him, "Oh, you visited Mama Gaddafi. Does that mean you're now working with Mama Gaddafi?" He said, "No." He said, it's important that people understand that we're not political virgins. We understand your experience, but we'd like to understand our own way, the way to do it." Essentially saying, when you're not ready, don't go out there, start screaming, yappy, yappy, yap, we're doing this way. And in Harlem, actually, when he was talking about fighting imperialism, he took off his holster with his bullets and said, "There are real bullets in here,
In here.
and we are ready to go to battle." But then he's not saying we, as in everybody. He's saying those that are prepared should, and will. So that said, I want to go to the reason why he was in the United States in the first place, which was addressing the UN. And the title of this speech was "Freedom Must Be Conquered." And this was
Mm.
given on October 4, 1984, at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. And he starts, I I come here to bring you fraternal greetings from a country of 274,000 square kilometers, whose 7 million children, women and men, refuse to die of ignorance, hunger, and thirst any longer. In their quarter of century of existence as a sovereign state seated at the UN, they have unable to really live. And he ends with this, just continues with this: "To express the views of my people concerning the problems of the agenda, consisting of the tragic web of events that are painfully cracking the foundations of our world at the end of the 20th century, a world in which humanity has been transformed into a circus, torn apart by struggles between the great and the semi-great, attacked by armed bands, and subjected to violence and pillage, a world in which nations, eluding international law, commands groups of outlaws who, gun in hands, live by plunder, organize sordid trafficking." Can you just relate what he said there, the last part there, to the contemporary times, please, before you can then, go off anywhere else? Sister.
Again, he could have been giving that speech today, verbatim,
Right.
down to the issue with the Palestinians
Yes.
and the children there and the
Mhm.
displacement, down to the people of the Sahrawi people
Yep.
and their fight, which from his speech he would have thought that by now would not be an issue with Morocco. So
Correct.
it's amazing that all of these decades have gone by and the issues, like getting further into the speech where he talks about the setup of the UN
Yeah.
and how they form, the different entities form their clubs and look out for their own interests, and
Mhm.
how Africans need to be doing the same. um how the UN can really assist in making these changes and holding these governments and these, really, he didn't use the word oligarchs, but he described them in every other way.
Mm.
um I would say even today, more than when he spoke, every issue that he addressed is still in play.
Mm.
Whether we look again at what is happening in Palestine, in Palestine, whether we look at what is happening on the continent with all of these players, each trying to extract and the UN largely sitting on the sidelines, impotent, if I could use that word. Um, and yeah, so still relevant in every way, which is why we need to study history. We need to understand how these things continue to play out when we don't make effective choices. And as many, he called the tricontinental group, right? So looking at Latin America, Africa, and Asia.
Asia.
You, yeah, I know China and India are making some moves and all of that, but still, the way the
Largely.
world is set up and how, who are the quote unquote world powers, still very much in play today.
Yeah. And
Right.
go on, Brother Milton.
Right. So the way you ended is actually very good because he actually predicted BRICS. That's what he was talking about. Way, way, way before BRICS, because he said there has to be an alternative to this. That's the only way we can create something to challenge them. And sure enough, now BRICS has materialized and continues to grow. And then, of course, he spoke about how the UN's own potential is undermined with the veto power of these countries. And he said that must change. He demanded a change for that. And that is the same thing that every year African leaders come here and they demand for the same thing, the veto power. Nobody's going to give you power. Nobody's going to say, oh, you have all these African countries, 54, have all these resources. You have more than 1.3 billion people. We don't think it's fair for you not to have veto. It won't happen that way. Now, if you have, maybe the United States of 54 countries is going to be a process. Maybe a shorter process could be having uniform economic policy. There are 4 or 5 major regional organizations, right? Maybe 6 now, because now we have to add the Alliance of Sahel states. But if all of them say, if you want uranium, whether you go to Niger, whether you go to Congo, this is the price. Pure and simple. And we all agree and we signed that, right? You want natural gas, you go to Mozambique, you go to Algeria, this is the price.
Yeah.
If you don't want it, go dig it in your own country, right? If they start that kind of talk, they have a much better chance of getting a permanent seat on the Security Council than coming and saying, oh, this is not fair, you colonized us, you exploited our people, you took us into slavery, you're still exploiting us, give us a permanent seat. Nothing in the world works like that. Otherwise, they never would have enslaved you in the first place. And they would not be stealing your resources.
I would say, why is the makeup of the Security Council even the way it is? If you're truly talking about democracy, why is it not one country, one voice, one vote? It's like
absolutely.
Yeah. Why do you have to have this hierarchy of now these countries are the ones who get to babysit the world?
Okay. No, you pose a very good question. That reminds me, I know at one time Sweden is like, one of the more democratic European countries now, right? In terms of, how it's the voting process and all that. But back in the day, they had situations where, you had, one person, one vote, and you had one person like 500 votes or something, right? They had that system. It was based on how much assets they owned within each town. So their votes were multiplied. And that's what these guys have. So they're neutralizing the votes of the General Assembly by creating this super vote. You talk about democracy, one man, one vote, one word, one vote, but then you neutralize it with the special vote. That's what they have. And you're right. You either have it for all or you don't have it. And every country in theory are supposed to enjoy the same type of sovereignty, right?
Yeah.
Each country, one vote, And then as he also addressed, which I think was very good because very few African leaders talk about that. They say, oh, we have the veto because we fought against, Nazism. We lost millions of people. He said, wait, millions of African soldiers were recruited to fight on your behalf against Hitler. So if you're stuck in yet, you're entitled to it because of the blood you spilled. Well, we actually saved you from Hitler. So we deserve it for that reason too. So I like how he anticipates
we
all the
fed you.
arguments.
And we
We
fed you
fed you.
during that war.
Exactly. We fed you. Yeah, you fed you. Actually, you're right. Fed them with food because they were not producing, right?
And and that's so crazy that at one point Africa was feeding the West.
Yeah.
And now Africa is dependent on food from the we need to pay attention to how these things shift.
It's criminal. It's criminal.
Yeah.
It's completely criminal. And it's because of the structures that they set. Mm-hmm. So now they have the World Trade Organization, right? They subsidize their farmers. We're not allowed to do so. It's very funny that the most reactionary US president right now, the current one, is the one who's now talking about ending subsidies to US farmers, which of course would boost production in African countries.
Okay. That said, they say charity begins at home. And one of the debilitating factors to the African continent has been the question of debt. Mm-hmm. And Sankara speaks to it. And this speech is titled "A United Front Against the Debt." This speech was delivered at the Organization of African Unity Conference, Addis Ababa, July 29, 1987. This speech is important for many things. There was a part he said in this speech that lends itself to his, let's just say, only very eventful exit from this world. I would begin. He says, Burkina Faso would like to begin by expressing its fear, the fear that as successful OAU gatherings take place, they are all the same. There is less and less financial participation in what we do. How many heads of states are ready to dash off to Paris, London, or Washington when called to meetings there, but are unable to attend a meeting here in Addis Ababa, in Africa? This is very important. He continues, are we going to continue to allow heads of state to seek individual solutions to the problems of the debt at the risk of creating, in their own countries, social conflicts that could endanger their stability and even the building of African unity? We believe analysis of the debt should begin with its roots. The roots of the debt goes back to the beginning of colonialism. Those who lent us money were those who colonized us. They were the same people who ran our states and our economies. It was the colonizers who put Africa into debt to the financiers, their brothers and their cousins. This debt has nothing to do with us. That is why we cannot pay it. The debt is another form of neocolonialism, one in which the colonialists has transformed themselves into technical assistants. Actually, it will be much more accurate to say technical assassins. They're the ones who advise us on the source of financing, on underwritings of loans, as if they were men whose loans are enough to create development in other countries. And then he ends with this. Where is it? This is not a provocation. I hope you can wisely offer us solutions. I hope our conference sees the necessity of stating clearly that we cannot pay the debt, not in a warmongering or warlike spirit. This is to avoid our going off to be killed one at a time. If Burkina Faso alone were to refuse to pay the debt, I wouldn't be at the next conference. Who wants to go first?
Brother Milton.
Great, sister.
Brother Milton, you go first because you might want to.
No, sure.
You're going to leave at.
No, I mean, actually, one of my favorite parts is the part where he says that we only have 16 African leaders out of 50 who were invited attending this conference.
Yeah.
Had there been a conference in Europe, well, we just saw 5 African presidents in the White House the other day, right? A week ago or so, right? But to come to a conference to actually deal with issues that impact your people, I didn't even know that only 16 leaders that showed up, until after I read that the speech.
Yeah.
It's actually that encapsulates the problem that we have. We really don't have leaders that are serious or dedicated. And if you read his speeches, if you hear him speak, you can tell the love and compassion that this man had for Africa. Really, willing to give his life. Really willing to give his life, which he did. Remember, he was warned that Blaise Compaoré was planning to kill him.
Yeah.
That he should lock him up. He should take preemptive action. And what was his response? That friends don't betray friends. Even though it was told, no, 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 that's not your friend. That's your enemy. So you will not be betraying a friend. You'll actually be intercepting an enemy, right? And of course, he's right in terms of the origins and the history behind the debt. It's what they call odious debt, right? It qualified clearly as odious debt. He knew the importance of doing it collectively. He predicted that they would kill him. And of course, they did. And what he said was that, another thing he said, very interesting. We are not renouncing the debt just because for the sake of renouncing the debt. We renounce the debt because we want to use the money to build our economies.
Yeah.
And to demonstrate that we are serious, it should go along with disarmament so that they know we're not spending this on weapons. In any case, all the weapons we use is not to defend us against the foreign powers. They have nuclear. None of the weapons we buy can defend us against that. It means the weapons we buy is being used against fellow Africans. So let's cancel the debt, disarm, so they can see that we're going to be spending the money on building our economy. And then here's the weirdest part, and which of course is the reason why he said, let's produce what we consume instead of importing. Because if they don't do that, even if the debt is wiped out, which in the past it has been wiped out significantly, what happens? Since they're not producing or manufacturing, they start importing all over again. And to import, they get loans for that. So they end up exactly the same position. Julius Nyerere, the late Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, once said, we borrow money to qualify to borrow some more. That's exactly what they do. They borrow so they can pay the interest. And once you pay the interest, boom, it's like a credit card,
I was gonna say just that in terms of the American credit system is we can't lend to you because you don't have any credit history. Oh, well, that means I don't owe anything. No, that means we don't know how much we can extract from you. So we will lend to those of you who are already in the system. We see, okay, you're in debt 10,000. You do keep up the minimum payments. We keep getting our interest. Yeah, we'll increase your your amount that you can continue to borrow, but not for the person who is saying, I don't have any debt. No, you're not qualified. You don't have a credit history. A couple of things I wanted to say on that is, again, I think that as we study Sankara's speeches, that it would be very helpful to go back and study how he was educated and what has been able to set him aside, set him apart from from the rest of us who've been educated. Many of us who've been educated outside of our country, or with an education system that is based on making us middle managers for the imperialists, because something very unique happened in his development that allowed him to think along the lines that he thought on, and that unfortunately is lacking in too many of our so-called leaders. The other thing I would say is that clearly along those lines of how you see yourself in your education is that respect for quote unquote your master as opposed to respect for yourself. So and we do this every day, by the way. Your brother or your sister or your best friend invites you to a party and you couldn't be bothered. But let's say here in racist Texas, Abbott invites you and then you're going to find your best suit and everything to show up. For what? So what does that mean about your mindset? The other thing I wanted to say about this mindset really quickly is When he came into power, that country was called Upper Volta. And when they changed the name to Burkina Faso, he went back to their own language. So Burkina from the Mossi language, meaning upright or honest people, and Faso from the Dioula language, meaning homeland. And so everything this man was doing was very intentional about our true independence.
Mm.
And so as I read him, I'm thinking, first of all, again, he said in one of his speeches, I'm not a prophet or whatever. He is, because the fact that what he was talking about 30 some years ago and predicting it still applies today, I think is amazing for him to have also
Yeah.
been at the age that he was. But it's also, what lessons can we learn about how we move forward? Even the point you made earlier about his ability to read the room. With every single one of his speeches, when you look to see who was he addressing, and then you see the
Right.
tone, you see him calling up facts, but you also see him doing it in a respectful manner, although there are parts where he punches hard.
Mm-hmm.
But really trying to be conciliatory, because his focus is on achieving a goal, not just throwing firebombs. And I think that that's something that
Right. No,
leaders should really
I agree.
study too.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. I agree. I wish he had lived long enough to have met Mandela, because Mandela was very important to him. He made
Yeah.
a constantly demanding for the release of Mandela. That's one of the things that almost broke relations with France, when he admonished Mitterrand
For going
Mhm.
to
for inviting Botha to South
Volta,
Africa.
yeah.
You know, I mean to France. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, that speech on the
I hope
death.
Sister is not frozen. I see her screen is not moving.
No, she's good.
Okay.
That speech at Addis Ababa happened to be his last, because 3 months after, his close brother, who he described as close brother, would overthrow him and personally see to him that he was executed and assassinated, rather. That's so that speech delivered July 29, 1987 was his last. He will be assassinated October 15, 1987. So 3 months to the day, which
And of
is
course, we should make the connection, which he did, to Maurice Bishop, who was
Right.
also taken out.
yes,
Another
yes,
young person,
yes.
just so many of our leaders never given a chance to
Right.
evolve, and for us as a people to really chart our own course.
Right. And in Bishop's case, they also use his so-called right-hand man,
Right hand
Exactly.
man, exactly.
Hmm.
Oh God.
Yep.
Bernard Cord, right.
Yep. And then
So,
and then took him out when they were
mm,
done with him.
Exactly. You know? And the saddest thing is that when he was in Harlem, he spoke about, we need to always be organized so that they don't do to us what they did to Maurice
Maurice
Bishop.
Bishop,
And then, sure enough, 3 years later,
the
same
same thing.
fate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same fate. Yes, so thank you all for coming through. We've been studying the speeches of Thomas Sankara from his book, Thomas Sankara Speaks the Burkina Faso Revolution. This is
Is it appropriate for me to say he was a handsome man, very handsome man?
Why not?
why not? Why not? Why not?
I think even his enemies, imperialism, said it too.
I mean, funny enough, you should say that. He had one habit, which was cycling, going jogging in the morning. So he would jog
Mhm.
with his bodyguards in the morning. Market women would specifically come and line up at the road where he was going to jog past just to say good morning.
Yeah, no.
So yeah. So yes, if you want to study more of his speeches, it's Thomas Sankara Speaks, and well, for those who might find that very odious to read, you can also read the a tiny. This is tiny but well, researched by Ernest Herch. It's titled Thomas Sankara, an African Revolutionary. But if you're still very studious, you can go for A Certain Amount of Madness, which is one of his quotes, The Life, Politics, and Legacy of Thomas Sankara. And again, okay, I probably shouldn't show this to sister. You might just go start. Well, yes. So Thomas Sankara, a revolution in Cold War Africa. Yes, that's Thomas Sankara. And so
Excellent.
yes, um,
Can we just, I know we're wrapping up. I
yeah,
just feel this in my spirit. Can we just pause for a second on all of
Mhm.
these really young, bright revolutionaries that these imperialists have cut down, the impact on their families? I'm feeling the weight of grief of a mother, of wives, of children who were too young to even really know, really experience their fathers, and what that long lasting impact is. How that puts fear in others not to step up in similar ways. How many of them
Yeah.
can we list up? Brother Milton, I said, you please join me. Steve Biko, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Morris Bishop, Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba. I mean, let's
Samara Machel,
Robert Michel, right?
come
Amika Cabral,
come on.
Yeah.
what's his name?
Medgar Evers.
Medgar Evers,
Um,
Chris Haney, Felix Momi. Oh my God. Whoa, whoa. There are too
It's
many. There are
certain.
too many. There are too many. There are too many. There are too
Yeah.
many. And those are just the men. Those are just the men.
exactly.
Those are just the
And
men.
the stories that we don't quite follow
Mm,
is what happens to those they left behind.
yeah,
I mean, if we just look at
Yeah.
Malcolm X's family, that became just like a series of tragedies.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Mm,
Man,
yeah,
Yeah.
but we must fight. And when we fight, we will win.
yeah, yeah. Brother Milton.
No, I think the sister, yeah, I can't top that, wrap up tribute. Thank you for that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Fred Hampton. Yes, Fred
Mm-hmm.
Hampton. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God. What's the other young man in the Black Panther? Sigo? His name escapes me. Oh my God. What? Fred
Someone,
Hampton.
someone will put it in the chat.
There's another young chappie. But that said, yes, we continue to live in their glory. And hopefully, we do more of this. And I must commend everyone for coming through. And thank you all. Brother Milton, last words?
Aluta continua.
Victory and
Thank you,
sister.
sister.
Thank
And
you.
sister.
Thank you.
And from me, yes. Good night and God bless.